Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we are coming to you live on this Monday, November 4th, 2024. Tomorrow is a big day here in the United States where we're going to be having an election. And I know everybody's a little bit on tenterhooks about that. Doesn't matter which side you're on, everybody's on tenterhooks, right? So today we're going to veer to the side for a second and talk about something really important, although it does have some ties to the election tomorrow. So, but first I want to welcome you and tell you, if you haven't been with us before on the show, my name is Shannon Penrod. I'm a proud pony, and you're watching Autism Live on the Autism Network. I'll back up and say that a pony is a parent of a neurodiverse individual. Those are the words that my son has given me to use to describe my relationship to the diagnosis. And so that is what it is. Autism Network is an amazing place, I believe, where we're doing some amazing podcasts. Autism Live, one of them, but also Ask Dr. Doreen, Today's Hyperfixation, Stories from the Spectrum, so many other shows that we do here. So our fabulous Chris Desmond is showing you some of the different ways that you can connect with us here on Autism Live and at the Autism Network. We know that many of you will watch us and actually watch us, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or live, and we appreciate that. We hope that you guys will write in live and interact with us, because that's our favorite thing to do, is to interact with you. But many of you, many more of you actually are listening to us on podcasts. And that is available to you for free wherever you download podcasts. I want you to know that it is free, although it's free to you, it's not free to us, which is why you will listen to advertisers when you're listening to the podcast. I hope you embrace that. And every time an ad comes up, you think, woohoo, I didn't have to pay for this because this company did. And then very quickly, they tell you their thing, and then you're back to the podcast. If that really is griping you and you really can't stand that, there is a way that you can pay a small fee every month. It's just $5 a month. Go to glow.fm/autism live. For $5 a month, you get everything that we do at the Autism Media Network, which includes Ask Dr. Doreen and Autism Live and everything else. You get that for $5 a month. It shows up in your inbox anytime we do a new show. And it's free of ads for just $5 a month. Hey, Rodney, how are you? So thrilled to have you with us this morning. Okay, so what else? I can't think what else. It's a big week around here. But we wanted to take some time today to talk about IDEA, because we kind of go around IDEA a lot. We mention it in passing. We've done it as jargon of the day. But want to talk specifically about what your rights are in relation to IDEA. So IDEA stands for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And I want to say that before we had IDEA in its current form, there was a time, and I know that many of you are watching in other countries, and this is unfortunately your reality. There was a time when kids with disabilities of all nature were not welcome at the public school. So if you brought your child with autism and something happened, then you were shown the door, and they would say to families, we don't have a program for you here, and those parents would take their children home, and it would be all on them. And that's the way it was, and the law upheld that, and a lot of people worked very hard to change that, because there was this shameful secret that there were kids who weren't being educated. Now, I want to say to you that I have a dear family member who did not come into my family until a little bit later on. That was adopted, and I want to be careful of their anonymity. But I want to say that the country from which they were adopted made a choice that because there was a disability, that this child would not be educated. And I got to see what the result of that is for this brilliant and talented young individual who had to do a whole lot of catch up because they were living in a country in which the belief was that that was not time well spent. Breaks my heart. And when I think about all of our kids, just imagine, listen, even with IDEA, it's frustrating, right? Because we have to fight for our rights, but how nice is it that the rights are there, and if we're willing to fight for them, we almost always win, right? But we still feel this thing about, why are they not including my child? Why are they not helping my child to be the best that they can possibly be? Imagine if the law was on their side in doing that. So let's talk about IDEA and about what are the things that we need to know from IDEA. Because it's a top 10, I'm going to go through it really quickly and then go back and talk about them individually. So buckle up, here we go. Number 1, it entitles your child to FAPE. And FAPE is a free, appropriate public education. Woohoo! They cannot send your kiddo home. Number 2, it promises your child an education in the least restrictive environment. And we'll talk more at length about what the rest of that sentence is and why that is critical to you and to your child and to our entire world. Number 3, there are a whole bunch of services and supports that are also included in order to make it appropriate. And we'll talk about each one of those. Number 4, it is, I can't even read because I put it in black. Oh, an individualized transition plan, especially for those of you who have kiddos that are a little bit older. Your children are all entitled to this, and a lot of times we don't know to ask for this, but they're entitled to it as long as they have the IEP. So we'll talk about that in a second. Number 5. Prior written notice. Woo! We're entitled to that. So we'll talk about what that is in a second. Number 6. I cannot read what I wrote. The right to due process. There we go. Thank you, Chris. I'm blind. The lights are in my face and I can't see the black on the blue. Next time I'll know to put white. The right to due process. Right. And we see that overwhelmingly families win when they go to court because the law in IDEA is written in a way that it is on the side of your child and you as a parent, which is wonderful. Number 7, assessments. You're entitled to assessments for your child at the very least every 3 years to be assessed and for decisions to be made on assessments. Important. And they don't cost you anything. Number 8, services in your neighborhood school. Shannon, what did you just say? Yes. No, your child is entitled to services in your neighborhood school, that not to be bused for 2 hours. We'll talk about this more in a second. Number 9, an individualized curriculum, that your child is entitled to have the curriculum changed to fit their needs. That's part of the IEP. And number 10, a preparation for a successful life. People often will say, well, they only take care of academic. That's not true. IDEA allows for things because it knows, just like in the picture, the egg becomes a chick, becomes a chicken, right? So even a kindergartner grows up to be someone who is living their life independently or not, with supports, right? And school is supposed to help with that according to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Okay, so that's 10 pretty incredible things. I want to go back and talk about these, and I want to talk about them in a very specific way. Because I think if we don't know the rights that we have, then we won't know what we stand to lose, right? I was just saying this morning that I'm changing my health care, and I have done nothing but complain about my health care plan for the last couple of years, and now I'm having to change it. I'm like, ooh, I'd like to keep my health care plan. I don't have that option. Right? So we got to know what we have and how to use that in case we lose it. So let's take a look. So number 1, FAPE. This is the cornerstone of everything, right? It says very clearly in IDEA that every child in the United States is entitled to a free, appropriate public education. It doesn't matter how disabled someone is. The law says, this act says, your child is entitled to an education and that it has to be free. Now, I have heard some stories recently of parents writing to me and telling me that the school said, oh, yeah, your education is free, but we're going to charge you for X, Y, and Z per child. No. Just no. Hear me when I say no. That's wrong. It should be free. There should be no cost to you. The one asterisk is if you are having your child stay after school for stuff that is not written into their IEP. If they're doing childcare at school because you are at work and there is nothing that they are doing in that childcare that is specific to their IEP, then they can charge you for childcare. But that is after school hours, and that is if it is not written into your IEP. By the way, if you have services that are written into your IEP that happen after school, free. Free, 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 free. There's my Lewis Black fingers coming out because I start to get mad. Free. And I was just to say, well, when we look at these words, well, we all understand what free is. Apparently not. Apparently some schools don't understand free. So let's make sure we set that straight. And then appropriate, this is the word we're going to talk about, because public, we know what that means, and education, we'll talk a little bit about that. But appropriate is the big word here. Now let's be clear that IDEA does not say best. Your child is not entitled to the best education. I know, that hurts. Everybody take a breath. But that isn't what your child is entitled to. However, your child is entitled to appropriate. And what does appropriate mean to you? I'm very big on looking words up in dictionaries to see what it means. And I know when my son was going to his first IEP, I went around and went to old bookstores and I bought dictionaries and I looked up all the definitions of appropriate until I found one that said effective. And that's the one I took it into the meeting. Because for me, and this is what you're going to argue with the school, what is actually appropriate and what is appropriate to them may not be appropriate to you, may not be appropriate to the evaluation that was done on your child. Appropriate is where we're going to argue, and there's room to argue with appropriate for everybody, but especially for the parent. Because if it's not working, then if it's not working and we can prove that it's not working, to me, I'm like, it's now the impetus is on the school. Prove to me that that's appropriate because we've already have evidence that it's not working, right? And that's what I tell a lot of parents going into IEPs. Keep evidence. Keep copies of work. Keep copies of the notes that they send home that your child kicked another child. And then you come back and say, well, what do we have for supports? And they say, oh, we've got 3-1, we're fine. And then I go, well, no, I don't think we are fine because here are the 5 notes that you sent home that my child did X, Y, and Z. So 3-1 clearly isn't appropriate. It's not working, right? So we always want to be mindful about when we're in IEPs, deciding with the school what is FAPE. Now, there's some great schools out there. I know I get more emails from educators saying, boy, it feels like you're really anti-school, Shannon. And I'm not. I am a former teacher. I am not anti-educator. I'm not anti-school. I am anti-people putting a dollar sign over a child's head. And there are lots of good schools who don't do that. I could name some of them. But some schools do that. And some school administrators do that. And I want to say that they do that because IDEA is not fully funded. How can you make a law that says that children are entitled to this and then not fully funded? Don't really understand that. I've never been able to do the math on that. But it has not been fully funded. We're going to talk about that in a second. But appropriate is what you're entitled to. And whether it's fully funded or not, as a parent, you get to go in and argue your child is entitled to it. It does mean that there isn't enough money and that they're trying to shortchange your kid. And you just don't let them. And then they're going to tell you that they're having to pull money from someplace else and you have to not care. Because the law says your child is entitled to free, appropriate public education. Okay, we'll keep talking about this. And by the way, if your child is being denied FAPE, it's actionable and sometimes the settlement involves money. Keep that in mind. Okay, number 2. Least restrictive environment. Okay, so the law says that your child is entitled to a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment in which your child has a floor of opportunity to access the curriculum. The least restrictive environment in which your child has a floor of opportunity in which to access the curriculum. So, basically, when this came in, what it says is that your child just can't be grouped with a bunch of other children with disabilities because that's what's convenient for the school. No, your child is entitled to the least restrictive environment in which they have a floor of opportunity in which to access the curriculum. And by the way, that's an individualized curriculum. So this makes the case for mainstreaming, which is not right for every child. I know if you look at videos that I did 14 years ago, you will hear me say that every child has the right to be mainstreamed. And I've talked to experts, and I've been in classrooms, and I've talked to parents, and I have come to understand that mainstream is not right for every child. I've also come to understand that a lot of schools don't know how to do mainstream. One of the biggest experts in the country said to me that he had started out saying every child should be included. And then he came to understand that sometimes what you're putting children into is a circumstance in which there's no adult who knows how to handle that, and that that's not fair either. But your child does have the right to it. It just depends on how much oversight and whether they're going to do it right, whether you want to do that. Doesn't change the fact that they have a right to be in that least restrictive environment. So, and by the way, it's the least restrictive environment in which, with proper supports, they have a floor of opportunity in which to access the curriculum. And this is where we get into that one-to-one aid situation that so many of you write into me about. And if you haven't watched it, do go watch the entire episode that we did about how to get a one-to-one aid, because it'll make some of that more clear to you. But if you want your child to be mainstreamed, you probably want a one-to-one aid, at least for the beginning. And I always say to people, argue for the one-to-one aid, say we just want to try it for 6 weeks and then we can pull back. What often happens is that the school will say, okay, well, we'll give it to you for 6 weeks, but that's all we're writing it into the IEP for is 6 weeks, and we're not writing it in for more than that. And you say, okay, let's try it. Why wouldn't we try it? And in some cases, they can fade the aid and they only need them for 6 weeks. That's so rare. You know why? Because the teacher makes the case for the aid to stay. The teacher says, I've got other kids in that classroom, and this helped me out a whole bunch because now I could spend more time doing X, Y, and Z because I have the aid. So least restrictive environment prevents our kids from being parked in classrooms where they're not being challenged, where they are all grouped together, so it's a bunch of people that are having a hard time together. And if one of them has an extra hard time, what does that do to the rest of them? We cannot be the society that we want to be if we are just segregating people because they have a disability. It's not what's best for those individuals. It is not what's best for us. When I think about, let's just take Temple Grandin, for example, and if we had lived in a society that said when she was little, you know what, she has a disability, let's not educate her. If her mother had allowed that, the world would have been a much different place and not as good. Temple talks all the time about these brilliant engineers that are on the spectrum, that if we had never educated them, if we had put them all in a classroom together and said, you guys stim it out, where would we be? Let's not be there. Let's take individuals into consideration, plus which the schools that I know that do good inclusion tell us that it has such far-reaching effects that the other students in the classroom get used to being in a classroom with people who look at the world a different way, who are differently abled in terms of mobility. They become more compassionate and more aware, and less entitled, thinking, hey, it should all be this way because that's the way I do it. Don't we want a world in which we're taking other people into consideration? I know I do. Least restrictive environment. If you look at your child's IEP, there is a page that is titled least restrictive environment. Often, there are some pages that I immediately go to when somebody asks me to look at their child's IEP, and one of the first one I go to is the LRE to see what is the argument that they made for the setting that they're putting the child in, because often it's where they lie. So, least restrictive environment. It is an amazing right for our children, a basic, amazing right. Okay, let's go on to number 3. Okay, so supports and services, and I mentioned that they have to have supports and services in order to make it possible for them to get FAPE in the least restrictive environment. So here's just a list of some of the things that your child is entitled to. IEE, which is an individual education, I can't think with evaluation, that's the last word. So if you've had the evaluation at the school and you disagree with it, you can ask for an IEE, which the district has to pay for. That is an amazing right to have. A SKIA, which I don't know what it stands for, but it evaluates whether or not your child needs and would benefit from a one-to-one aid. How about a FBA, which is a functional behavior assessment? You get the note that comes home that says, Johnny kicked somebody. You say, what happened before? What happened as a result of it? I would like an FBA done on this so that we can figure out what the function of the behavior is so that we can actually intervene properly. We can do an LRE evaluation. How about a recreational aid evaluation if your child is having trouble on the playground? How about preferential seating? How about a one-to-one aid? How about all kinds of accommodations that are very specific to your individual? Everything from being able to have a set of, if there's something that they're working with in the classroom, to have that set of it at home so that you can properly work on it at home. How about push-out, pull-ins? So that there's a period of time, a push-out, and it should be pull-out, push-ins. That's why I'm like looking at it funny. So if your child leaves the classroom to go to OT, that's a pull-out. If the OT comes and sits in the classroom with your child to help them to be able to do their letters while they're doing it and make sure that they're sitting up and all the proper things, that's a push-in. So it's not a push-out, pull-in. It's a pull-out, push-in. Those are just some of the different things that are possible, and there's more, for someone who has a need in order to get FAPE and that LRE together. We might take any of these to support and evaluate and give services. All right, moving on to number 4. Okay, individualized transition plan. When your child, in most states, it starts around 14, but it has to, in every state, it has to be implemented by the 16th birthday. Everyone who has an IEP is entitled to this. Somebody wrote to me recently and said they want to move my 11-year-old to a 504 plan. What are the pros and cons? And with an IEP, you are entitled legally to an ITP. With a 504, not so much, right? It's possible that the school might still do it, but it's also possible that they will say, we don't have a program for that, where they don't have the right to say that with an IEP. Now, I want to tell you, this is the most underused part of the whole IDEA. And I know Joanne Lara was working really hard to make parents aware of this, and I try whenever possible. There are 3 parts of an ITP. One is figuring out where your child is going to live after they finish school. And they might be finishing school at 18 with a diploma, or they might be finishing school at age 21 with a certificate of completion. But either way, if there is an IEP, the school is responsible for helping the child figure out where they are going to live when they are not in school. Now, a lot of times, the school will just check this off and go, well, they're living with you. And it's up to parents to say, no, we would like for you to look at alternative options. And then the school has to go look for alternative options. You don't have to do that. School can do that. That doesn't mean you have to say yes to them, but wouldn't it be nice to get a sheet of options? Woo, let the school work for you. Okay, the second thing is that they have to figure out where will they work, and that's for everyone. I know there are some of you, this is the other thing that I've changed my mind about over the years. 14 years ago when I started doing this show, I was like, well, some people are going to work, and some people it's not appropriate. It's not right for them. And I've changed my mind on that. And I've had my mind changed on that. I've had too many people come to me and say, that's stinking thinking, Shannon. Everybody, this is again, I'm going to quote Joanne Laura, everybody deserves to have a seat at the table. And in order to have a seat at the table, they got to have a job. So ITP says across the board, it has to help solve where will your child work when they are done with school. And they have to prepare them for that. How amazing is that? Doesn't mean that they have to work, but they have to be prepared to work, which means internships. Yay, let the school figure that out. And then the third thing is who will be their support team. Now, again, schools say, well, we just assume that's the family. And tell them, no, I want you to assume that I'm not going to live forever, because I'm not going to live forever, right? This is incredible. So many of you get to the point and you all of a sudden you go, oh, I fell off the cliff. My child is done with school. And these three things are not in place. I want to tell you, for all of you who have kids that are teens and tweens, start pushing this. And I know if you go into the IEP meeting when they're 14 and say, hi, we'd like to talk about the ITP, they will say to you, oh, we don't do that until they're 16. And then you say to them, well, no, you have to start implementing it at 16. I'm asking what the plan is. Because are we just on the day that they turn 16, you're just going to sit down and make the plan on that day? Doesn't seem right to me. So argue for that. That's number 4. Okay, let's move on to number 5. Written prior notice. Oh, my goodness. What is written prior notice? So you have an IEP. Your child's going to school, and something changes. They have to give you written prior notice if they're going to change anything, because that is a legal document. I can't tell you how often this comes up. The other day, somebody wrote to me and said, my child was in a program, and they moved my child out of that program and put my child in another program with a different teacher. And I said, did they give you prior written notice? What prior written notice does is it makes it so that you have a legal piece of paper notifying you that something is changing. And then you have the right to say, no. And you can ask for a stay put. You can say, nope, we're going to figure this out. But in the meantime, I want to stay put. So you want to be looking out for, if they give you prior written notice, that you respond to it and say no if no is what you need to say. Sometimes you go, okay. It's because sometimes, they're moving and it's a good thing and you're on board with that, right? But if you're not, you say, nope, asking for a stay put while we figure this out. And then they have to. And they're going to tell you they can't, and yada, yada, yada. This is why also in your IEP they won't put, or they try hard really not to put specifics in, because they do legally have to do what's written in that piece of paper. So if they said, your child will be in this classroom with Mrs. Schwartz. Mrs. Schwartz will be the teacher, and she will use this. You're not going to see this in an IEP. But if they said that in the IEP, and then Mrs. Schwartz decides to leave on maternity leave, they no longer have that program, but they have to give you prior written notice, and you could say no, and then what are they going to do because they don't have Mrs. Schwartz? That's why they don't write those things into the IEP, right? Everybody's always like, why can't they just tell me that they're going to give me this teacher? That's why. Because if they write it in that paper, they have to give it to you. And if they don't, it's actionable, and sometimes checks are written. That's not what we're about as parents. Can we just admit that we're not looking for a check, but we're looking for the education? But they know they're liable for it. So always look for the prior written notice. If they make a change in your child's program and they didn't give prior written notice, say, okay, yay, when you find out, because you're going to win. You're going to win, and they're going to bend over backwards, and they're going to make you sign a paper saying you're not going to sue them because you could, right? I encourage you, like, ask for all the things that you want and sign the paper, because you don't want to sue anybody. You don't want to go through that process. You want to get what your child needs, what's appropriate, right? But if they don't give you prior written notice, believe me, if you call them out on it and say, I was given no prior written notice, what are we going to do about this? All of a sudden, they're going to be your best friend, and they're going to try to give you everything your child needs. Wouldn't it be nice if it was that way all the time? Well, we need it fully funded, right? Okay, let's move on to number 6. Number 6, the right to due process. You have a right that if it's not going the way you want it to file papers for due process. You can do this on your own, although I just don't know very many. I hear from lawyers all the time, it's easy. All you have to do is, and I don't know any parent I don't literally know any parent who's been able to do this without the help of an attorney. But you have that right to do it. And when you do that, it sets in motion a bunch of different things. In the number of years that I have been doing this, I only know a handful of parents who actually get to due process. And I want to say that to you so that, because it strikes fear into the heart of every parent when we start talking about going to due process and you're going to take this in front of a judge, and they're like, it's going to be 5 days in front of the judge and the lawyer's going to charge you $800 a day, and you go, oh my gosh, like, I don't want to play anymore, right? Guess what? The school doesn't want to play anymore either, because 9 times out of 10, the parents win at due process, right? And the school has to pay for their lawyer, who's more expensive than your lawyer. And if you're with a good lawyer, your lawyer will say at the end of it and to the judge, okay, and so we would like to ask, because you found in our favor, that the school be responsible for attorney fees. So not only do they have to pay their attorney fee, they have to pay your attorney fee. So things don't get to due process very often because nobody wants to waste that kind of time and money, right? Especially when the law is written pretty clearly. So why file for due process? Well, it's an expectation when things aren't working and we're not getting to an agreement. It's an expectation. So you file due process, and the very next thing that happens is it's mandatory that they ask both sides if they would like to participate in mediation. Okay. So what is mediation? Mediation means it's just going to be one day where you, and if you have an attorney or an advocate, you're going to bring them with you, meet in a room with the school, and they have their attorney with them. They're going to bring their attorney pretty much regardless. And it's going to cost them for the day. And there is going to be an impartial judicial person, usually they're judges, that volunteer their time to do this, who say, let's not go to court. Let's not spend all that money. Let's reasonably, and the judge, I've done this twice. The judge says, why are you here? What is the disagreement? What do you need? And you state your case very succinctly. And then they say to the school, and what is your case? Why are you saying no to that? And then they try to help you work it out between them. And it's very interesting. And usually the school wants to go to mediation because what they want is to get it settled so that they don't go to court. And at the end, you have to sign a piece of paper saying that you're agreeing not to sue them for the previous years. For anything that's happened in the past, they put things into it that you cannot sue them for. So they like that, because then that means they're done with you for a year. And they super like that. And if they were going to have to give in anyway, they want to have that piece of paper saying, and you're not going to surprise us and sue us. Makes everybody really happy. Don't be afraid of mediation, but go with somebody that you trust that has a good, smart head. And almost always, I haven't heard anybody say that they got a bad mediator, because they're people who are donating their time. They want to be there. If you're reasonable, boy, they're really, really helpful. That was my experience of it. So due process is a good thing. If we didn't have that, the school could just say no and do nothing. And a lot of times you guys will write in and say, well, that's what the school has done. But the next step is you file due process, and then you go to mediation. So keep that in mind. Okay, number 7, assessments. At the very least, every 3 years, they call it the triannual, every 3 years, triannual, your child is entitled to assessments to see how they're doing And the checkup here is supposed to be, is what the school has provided appropriate? Because if it is, and we're taking assessments, we will see improvement. And if we don't, then we look and say we have to change something because it's not appropriate. I think this is missed a lot of times with parents, that they go, oh, the assessments and da-da-da-da-da. And, if my child does well on the assessments, they're going to take services away. I don't think you ever need to really worry about that, because they're going to say that they want to take the services away regardless of what it says on the assessments, because it's costing them money and they need to move on to the next group of kids. So just know that. Like, have the assessments done and read the assessments. They're long and they're exhausting. But I like to read them, and I have Post-it notes in lots of different colors that make it more reinforcing for me. And I have highlighters that are in all different colors. And by the way, when you send me an assessment and I'm reading, I just read a great assessment the other day. Like the best assessment I think I've ever read. And it was for a kiddo in LA Unified. And I was like, dang, this assessment is great, because they literally did the testing, showed you what the results were, said what the implications were, and tied it to what was happening in the classroom. I haven't seen assessments like that in a while. But, they're not always these great, great reads. Sometimes it's very frustrating, but they're not allowed to lie on assessments, right? And often there will be stuff in the assessments that goes towards what you are arguing, right? And yet they skimmed over it. They didn't necessarily read the whole assessment, the rest of the team, and decided the person, the puppet who's at the top saying, no, you can't have the services, often doesn't read the fine print on the assessments. Let me tell you, once upon a time, my son, he was put in a classroom that was in one of those portable units that sits outside. And we were working with a doctor at the time who said, don't allow that to happen. Don't allow that to happen. The air quality in those is terrible. And he got me really revved up about it. And he said, I can show you studies where the kids' IQs are 10 points lower in those outdoor units. And I was like, what? And I tried very hard to get him moved out of the unit. And the school was like, not going to happen, not going to happen, not going to happen. And I kept pushing, saying, I'm concerned about the air quality. And they said to me, no, we have OSHA. We do all these assessments on a regular basis. And I said, okay, can I see the assessments? Well, suddenly they couldn't provide them. And then they were like, all right, fine, because I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And they said, we'll do an assessment on that classroom. And it's going to cost us money, but we're going to do it to prove to you, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I said, great, wonderful. So then they sent me a report. In the first page of the report, it said, so we have proven that the classroom thing, it's all fine, and so we're not doing anything. These are our findings, da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, oh, okay. But then I read the report. And in the report, it said that the air level in the room was not within OSHA guidelines. It literally said it in the report, you guys. And I was like, what on earth? And I went back to them with it highlighted and said, it says right in your report, and now what are you going to do? You've proven that the air is not safe in the classroom. I'm taking my child out. It's in your own report. And the mess over that, you guys, the mess over that, and the things that they had to do, and it was bad. It was really, really bad. But if I hadn't read the report, and by the way, they then they had to reassess and prove to me that the air quality was up to standard in that classroom, or my child wasn't going to go to school there. My point is, read the assessments, because sometimes what the recommendation is and what the findings is on the first page are not what was in the assessment. But and this was slightly different, but I see this all the time. All the time. Okay, you're entitled to the assessments, though, and they can't charge you for them. And if you don't agree with the assessments, then you ask for that IEE, the individual education evaluation, and they have to pay for that. And I see a lot of you have been asking for the IEEs, and your school has been saying no, and you need to get them to write in writing why not. I'm reading one right now where they've written this big long explanation that has nothing to do with the assessments. Then it's time to lawyer up. But you have a right to the assessments, and you have a right to a free one if you would disagree with the assessments, but you have to have reasons why you disagree with the assessments. That's why you have like work samples, and you say, okay, the assessment said this, that my child can do this, but here are 5 work samples that were from last week that show that my child cannot do that. So what's wrong with your assessment? I want him reevaluated. That's a good reason to ask for an IEE. Okay, let's move on to number 8 because we're getting low on time. Okay, services in your neighborhood school. So there is a part of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act that says that your child has a right to all of these services that we have talked about in the school that they would have been assigned to had they not had a qualifying disability. Let me say that again. Your child has a right to have all of these services in the school that they would have been assigned to had they not had a disability. Now, you have a child, and they're saying to you, your child has autism, so we've decided to put the autism program in the school over here in our district that's 30 miles away. And because of traffic, that means that your child's going to get on a bus and be on a bus for an hour every day to go to that program and an hour every day to come back. And you don't want your child to be on the bus. You have a case to say to them, no. No, that doesn't work for me, and that flies directly in the face of IDEA. You absolutely have the case because it's there. Now, a lot of parents make a different choice and decide what they want to argue because of the program. You can push and shove, but then basically what they will do is they'll have to create an autism program in your school, and your child might be the only one in there, and ooh, the hate that you will get for that. You will be within your rights, but sometimes parents say to me, well, the other school is closer to my work. She has friends there. I'm going to make it work there. And we're not going to do the bus all the time, or we are going to do the bus, but then you ask for the 1-to-1 on the bus. There are lots of reasons why you may choose not to hold their feet to the fire on this, but it doesn't change the fact that you have this right. Schools have ignored this and set up autism programs, and they tell families all the time, we don't have a program there for your child. I don't care. The law says you have to. But if that isn't the thing you want to argue, you don't have to argue it, but it's there. Let's move on to number 9, an individualized curriculum. Sometimes they will say, well, your child can't be included in this classroom because your child can't keep up with this classroom. Well, the law says that your child has that least restrictive environment in which they have floor of opportunity in which to access the curriculum, and the curriculum can be modified for them. It's a lot of work for the teachers. Let's be clear on that. The reason why they say no to this all the time is because it's a lot of work, and I think the parents should be cognizant of that. But your child is entitled to it, and if they have to hire extra people to administer and create the curriculum, so be it. Your child is entitled to it, but they're looking at it with a dollar sign. You should not. Your child's entitled to it. And then last, but certainly not least, your child has the right to a preparation for a successful life. So it's baked right into IDEA that it says that your child is supposed to be educated and prepared for life after school, right? That goes back to that ITP, but part of that is social interactions. So often we see kids on that, we got the 1-to-1 aid. Woohoo! That's wonderful. But we got 1-to-1 aid, and they come in the morning and they do the morning session, and then your child goes to music class and the 1-to-1 aid is given a break. Well, they have to have scheduled breaks, Shannon. Yes, of course they do. But then they come back, they're with your child, now it's lunchtime. And they go on break again because they have to have lunch, Shannon. Of course they do. But the problem here is that the school thinks that by hiring one aide, they're going to cover this child end to end, because there are natural breaks in the day where the child is having a break, so the one-to-one aide gets a break. But this is wrong. This is wrong. And I always used to say, when I was in IEP meetings, when they would say, well, he'll be without a one-to-one aide during this time because she'll be taking a break. And I always used to say, oh, right, absolutely, of course. I want her to have lunch, and I'll just ask him to not have autism during that time. And then I let that sit for a minute, right? And they go, well, and I just sit and wait. Well, I mean, but he'll probably be fine out on the playground. And I go, do we have evidence that what you're saying, that that's appropriate for him to be on the play? Let's take a look at, look, I've got this note here that says that he kicked somebody on the playground. And then I've got this note that we had another so I don't think that's really appropriate for him to be alone on the playground. So what do we want to do about that? And sometimes they can rearrange things, and somebody else, they can have a one-to-one aide that's already on staff, or they bring in a second aide, and they have a morning aide and an afternoon aide. There are solutions to these things, but it all costs them money. And that should not matter to us. And the reason why I bring this up on this slide is because so many of you write and say, my child is having trouble making a friend, and they tell me that's nothing to do with them. It absolutely is. Having a friend is partially about your life after school. And they'll say, we only do educational things. Well, no. IDEA says there has to be some social component in there as well. Otherwise, what successful life are we leading after school? Plus which, if part of your day at school is to be social during lunchtime, then, excuse me, why are we leaving that out? It's one of the reasons why I brought up on a previous slide that you can ask for a recreational aid assessment. For those of you whose kids are having a really hard time on the playground, ask for that. I didn't even know that existed until I brought in 2 goals for the lunchtime and playing on and recess, because we were seeing problems. And I said, I want these goals written in. And once there's goals during that time, there has to be somebody that's evaluating that. Otherwise, I didn't put it on there, but that's another thing that IDEA allows for, is that you have to have regular benchmarks, and you have to have them reported on. How is the child doing? You are entitled to 4 of those a year. And if you're not getting them, then they're out of compliance. So why am I talking about all of this today? Because this is important stuff, and you need to know what your rights are, and you need to know how important IDEA is. It's critical. This is not a perfect world, and there's a lot that has to be rewritten. I want you to know that 8 years ago, I was part of a task force that was rewriting some of the things to make it easier for kiddos, make it easier for parents. Tomorrow, you have a choice between 2 candidates. And I would be the last person here to ever tell you what you needed to do. And I know that we all have issues. We all have concerns that are personal, and you got to vote your conscience. I just wanted you to know that this is important legislation, that if we don't have it, a whole lot's going to go wrong for our kiddos. And of the 2 candidates tomorrow, one of them is saying that they will fully fund IDEA. I don't know if that's true or not, but they're at least saying that they will. And the other candidate is saying that they want to get rid of the Department of Education. And I just want to say to you that if the Department of Education is gone, IDEA is gone. And all of this goes away. And I don't know what will happen then. Would I like to think that people will be kind to our children and provide services? I know better. Because even with the law there, we have to fight for it. But the law is on our side. And if we don't have that, my friends, I don't know what will happen. So there is a choice for you. And if this is not one of your hot button issues and you have other hot button issues, Feel free to disregard this. But I'm always a big one for informed consent, right? It's one of the things that I spend probably 9/10 of my day helping to inform people. This is what you're saying yes to. This is what you're saying no to. Informed consent. What do you want? You get to decide. Informed consent doesn't tell you what to do. It says, here's the information. Now you figure it out. I just wanted you to have this information as you're making decisions. This is not perfect, but it's super duper important. Okay. We don't have any questions, but I wanted to take just a minute to talk about the next couple of weeks because there's some interesting things going on. We will be playing a recorded version of Ask Dr. Doreen tomorrow because Dr. Doreen is not able to be with us tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, we've got a really amazing interview that we have for you that we pre-taped a couple of weeks ago that I think is really important. A young mom who is a doctor who has gotten a diagnosis and wanted to talk about what that experience is like for her as an adult. It's very eye-opening, my friends. Like, my jaw was on the floor for half of it. So I encourage you to check that out. Then next week, we are scheduled to be here with great shows, and I hope that we will be here. I have jury duty next week, so every day is like a crapshoot about what will we do, what won't we do. But then I also want to take a minute to talk about the toy guide because we are in the last stages of finishing the toy guide. And we hope that by the end of this week, you guys will be able, we've worked so hard this year to get it done earlier so that you can make all the choices that you need to make for the loved one that you have in your life that this will apply to. I want to say that there are 6 different categories of ages, but, we never go by ages, right? But still, in order to, we had to put it that way. But the truth of the matter is that there's some stuff in the adult category that could work in the preschool category. But it makes sense, right? And I think that it doesn't work as much the other way. I tried to give you age ratings on the stuff that was for babies and toddlers because there's stuff that's a choking hazard in the other age ranges. But so there is a baby toddler category, then there's the preschool category, then it's school age, then it's tween teen, then it's adults, and then there is a category for caregivers. I especially would love to hear from you guys if I've gotten it right because there's 18 awards in each category, and I'd love to hear from you guys if you think I got it right in the caregiver. I'm always trying to think about what do parents tell me that they would really, really like. And it's so individual, right? But there's 18 different things. Hopefully I found something for everybody. I'd love to hear if you do. I also want to say that there's an opportunity that for a lot of the toys, they're available on Amazon. That isn't true for everything, but a lot of things are available on Amazon, and there is the possibility of ordering it directly from Autism Live's Amazon storefront. And when you do, we get, something. I don't know, some affiliate credit. I don't know if it's 2 cents, you guys, but we'll take it. It helps keep the lights on. So, and it doesn't cost you any more than if you bought it someplace else. So if you have a mind, next week sometime we will have the storefront up and running, and you can purchase directly from the Autism Live Amazon storefront, which in and of itself is a little crazy. The world we live in. We live in interesting times, don't we? Okay, so the toy guide coming, and we'll feature a bunch of the toys on the show, and even some that we couldn't squeeze on to the toy guide because they were really good, but we had other toys that I couldn't say no to. So we have a couple that are, I guess I'm calling them honorary mention, that we'll be demonstrating for you as well on the show. I love toys. And somebody said to me recently, how did this all come about? Why did you start doing a toy guide? And I said, because there was one day when somebody asked me, they were so frustrated trying to teach their child the alphabet. And they said, I just, they're in kindergarten, nothing is working, I'm ripping my hair out, I don't know what to do. I feel like my child is really smart, but if we don't get the alphabet, we're not going to get to reading and we're not going to get to all this other stuff. And they were circling the drain on it. And I went, oh, I got you. There's this one little DVD that you need to get. It's from Leapfrog. It's called The Letter Factory, and it's freaking brilliant. And so they went, oh, okay, I'm going to go get it today. And they ordered it, and they wrote me this big long letter, and they were like, oh my gosh, why are you not telling everybody about this? And I thought, yeah, why am I not? So I brought it in. I brought the DVD into work the next day. And I said, hey, just telling people, because I mentioned this to a parent, and she had the same experience that I did. This is incredible for teaching your kid the alphabet, and here's why. And here's the research that they do, and it's just incredible. And if you push this button, it'll play automatically. They watch it like 4 times, and they'll be into it. And I will say about this, because I love Leapfrog, right? But one of the things that was brilliant about this DVD was that the letters were all like little stick figure characters. So the L, was an L, but he had legs, and then they all had an action. So they would say what their sound was, and then they would perform an action. And like I remember, K was kick. So and it would be the big K and the little K walking together, and they'd go ka ka ka, and then they would kick, and they would have they would say kick with us, and the kids would all kick. And I think that physical, like if you think about it, it hit it that visually, it hit it orally, and then it was physically, so it got baked in. He learned the alphabet, right? And he learned it faster than I could believe because watching this DVD. So everybody said, oh my gosh, we wish you would do more of these, because everybody went and bought the Leapfrog DVD. So then we started just regularly covering toys, and then we went, why are we not putting out a guide? And the rest is history, my friends. That is how we got started doing the toy guide. And it's probably one of the hardest things of the year for me because it's huge, the toy guide. But it also is the most fun. I get so excited. The UPS guys and the, Prime and everybody know when the toys arrive for me to unbox them and open them. We should take video of that because I get so excited. I'm like a little kid. They come in the door and I go, did you bring me toys today? And they're like, I don't know. It's flat. I don't think it's a toy. And then other times they'll be like, oh, you got something from VTech. And I go, yay! Right? Like a little kid. It's Christmas all the time here. So I hope you will get excited about it too, because the power of a good toy in the hands of anyone, oh, talk about ignite hearts and imaginations. It makes me very happy when I see kids play with a toy and get very excited. So we're going to show you some toys. You'll get to see some toys very soon. But my friends, tomorrow's a big day. I hope that we all remember to be kind to each other above everything else. Let's remember to be kind. Random acts of kindness all this week so that we all remember that that's a thing that can still be. We can all disagree. Let's all be kind, though, about it, right? All right, that's all the time that we have for today. Remember that tomorrow, actually for the rest of the week, we're doing pre-taped episodes. But it's good stuff, you guys. I hope you'll tune in and watch. And then hopefully I'll be with you here on Monday after being told that I don't have to be there for jury duty. Woohoo! Doing my civic duty. Trying to, anyway. All right. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you, too. Bye-bye for now. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.